before, there's 5 companies that do custom bracing. And so each company has a different way to approach the problem, okay? So no matter what happens or what brace you choose, it's best to go and watch their casting video just before you do it, because they may want it a certain way, okay? So, but this is, I'm going to kind of try to give a general overview of the whys of the different ways, okay? So to start with, generally before we're to this casting process, you've done an evaluation of the animal, and you're trying to figure out, well, what brace should I use, okay? So you've decided, well, this, let's talk about the Achilles. So if we have an Achilles rupture, okay? So what motion isn't happening? Or what motion am I trying to replace, okay? And so you've gone through this process with your evaluation already, right? And so you're starting to think about, well, what do I need to do? What type of forces do I need to apply this corrective force, okay? And the simplest force thing that you need to know, is, without getting into complex physics in this, is a 3-point force system, okay? Now, a 3-point force system is, the best way to think about it is if you were trying to break a pencil in your fingers, okay? We've all put a pencil in here and kind of bent it. And so when we put the pencil in between our fingers, there's 3 different points that our fingers contact the pencil, right? And if we're trying to bend it, we have 1 on either side and 1 in the middle, right? And so basically, if you look at the hawk, we're trying to keep the hawk from flexing, right? So how would we limit that? 1, we would push here as the center point, 2, and 3, right? Those are our 3 forces. So that if you look at the hawk brace, we have the plastic in the front where we're trying to apply that pressure. Plastic back here, we're trying to apply this pressure. We don't have it down here because there's actually a ground reaction force. Equal and opposite forces, okay? Where the ground touches, there's a force here, and it's the opposite down here. So we don't actually have to have that 3rd point right there, okay? But you can see when you're trying to, first you evaluate, and you try to figure out where are those 3 points that I have to push. And then you can go to all the websites and look for what brace is going to apply those forces, okay? And then you go to their casting, right? Is that simple enough, or does that make sense in that process of it? So in this case, what I like to do is I have those that kind of in my mind a little bit of what I want to do, but most generally all these braces are going to be in a natural standing position, okay? You just hold that up for me. So before I ever get into the process of wrapping the cast or anything like that, I want to see if I can get the limb into the position I want, okay? And, rewind just a second. You can see that I'm doing the casting sideline. There's some companies that prefer that the dog be standing, and they want to be able to correct the leg, which would be in a natural standing. My personal viewpoint is, one of the balls that you're trying to juggle is gravity in that case, okay? And we can set gravity on the table just by lying the dog on the side, and then we can control the leg into the position that we want. That be that natural standing position, okay? If you don't know the natural standing position, you can take a picture of the sound side, lay the picture right here on the side, or your iPhone, and let it sit there. I urge you not to use the goniometer in this case, because once you start wrapping, if you try to pull out a goniometer, it's probably going to be set up before you can have it in place, okay? So, but what's most important is you have to make sure that you can get the limb into that position anyway, okay? So I'm going to start moving the leg around, and your hand position is very important in this. So remember the 3 forces that I said. The middle force is where I put my first hand, and I wrap my hand around the back of the hawk, just below, right? The second, I'm using the palm of my hand, and I'm wrapping the pinky around the paw, because I have to get the paw in a natural standing position. But see, with this, I can control flexion and extension, and I can control varus and valgus with this hand position, because the third force is just the body weight, okay? So I can do all those things, and in doing this, the dog becomes comfortable with what I'm trying to do, and they're not trying to pull back, right? We have great dogs here today, but that's what we're trying to do with that. Are there questions on the general 3.4 systems and positioning? The only, do that for the hawk and the carpal. So the carpal, you're going to do the same thing. Now the stifle, this is the one exception for our company, and we're the only ones that do this. We actually ask you to extend the stifle just a bit, because what that does is it reduces the cranial drawer. Okay, so then we have the limb in the position that we want, and we'll correct the thigh section as it's not the natural standing in the lab. But we'd rather have the cranial jaw reduced in the cast, okay? So now we're to a point where you can see that I put on a cotton stockinette. Some companies will use saran wrap or cling wrap and wrap it around. The main thing is that you need to understand is all it is a barrier for the fur not to stick in the fiberglass, okay? So whatever you're most comfortable with, use that. Personally, I can't get saran wrap to stick to my Tupperware, so I just use this. It's a way that I prefer, but everybody has their own comfort zone. The next thing is we're going to have a cutting strip. And so the cutting strip is used so we can cut the cast off the leg. So if you were going to put on a cast for a fracture, you would have a whole bunch of cast padding to protect the bony landmarks. But what we want to actually do is we want to see the bony landmarks. We want to see all the contours of the leg. So we just want one little barrier between there. The problem is, if you tried to take a cast saw and cut this off afterwards, you would cut all the bony landmarks, right? So we're going to use a buffer strip that we can actually use a hook blade, and then that will cut down that strip to cut it off, okay? And then we can just peel the cast off. Now the cast isn't going to be 8 or 10 layers like we might do in a fracture, okay? We only need 3 layers at the most. And I'll kind of show you how to do that here as I start wrapping. But 3 layers, if you get any more than that, you won't be able to cut it off very easily. You'll start sweating and, you know, how am I going to do this? So just stick with the 3 layers. So when we put this buffer strip in, you can tape it on. I tend to just use the cotton stockinette and cut a small hole at the top and the bottom. I'll pull that out real quick. Now, this buffer strip, when you cut down it, you see it's a trough basically, and this hook blade will run down it, and so you push down, and that keeps it from sliding off side to side and cut the animal, okay? But if you try to cut this, turn this at an angle, see how it bends. So what we try to do is we try to find the best way that we can keep this a nice smooth contour without bending. So on the hawk, we're going to put it on the cranial portion of the limb, okay? As well as the carpus. Now remember I said that we're going to extend the stifle, so you can actually put it on the lateral border here, okay? And that's better for us so we can see the tibial tuberosity, because that's where we're trying to push the counter pressure. So we'll slide that in there. And again, before I go to do the casting, I'm going to do my positioning, make sure that I can get the leg where I want. So at this point, we're going to look at the sticking the casting tape in the water, okay? Now, a couple things about the casting tape. First is, I haven't opened this yet, okay? Water starts the process, but so does air, okay? So do not open your casting tape until you're absolutely ready to start, because you just started your clock. Now, fortunately, we send you 2 rolls of casting tape, so you do have backup, but just know that the air will also set this off as well, okay? The next thing is the water temperature, okay? If you use hot water, it's going to set up very quickly. So if you're new to this, use cold or at least lukewarm water. It's going to buy you more working time. The casting tape that we use, it has a different curve. So most casting tape will just slowly set up at a curve like this and slowly get harder. This actually gives you working time, and then sets up fairly quickly, okay? But the nice thing about the working time is you can have a nice smooth surface with that, okay? Pretty much any casting tape you have in your clinic will work, okay? Everybody sends a different type of roll of casting tape with their casting kit. So now that we're ready, I pull it out, and I'm just gonna massage it in the water here for a few seconds, and I'm kind of spinning it around, wetting it out. I'm gonna start rolling. So when I unroll, I'm gonna unroll this way. If you try to unroll this way onto the limb, it gets very complicated. It also makes, you can't roll it as tight. I'm gonna start just in mid-paw, and I'm gonna roll distally past the end of the paw, okay? And then, as I come back up the leg, see how tight I'm pulling? I'm pulling it very tight here. And I'm only overlapping by a half. So that gives me 1, 2 rolls, layers there, and see there's one, and I have a second layer. So remember I said 3 layers, right? When we get to the top here, I'll show you how I get the 3rd layer. So when you get to the top, you can see that this is not sticking together very well on parts. If you actually twist this about 45 degrees and roll down, but this time you're not overlapping the previous layer, now you're at 3 layers. And it also gives you strength to the cast. Now we're at the end. You don't have to use all of it, okay? There's some parts that are kind of folded over. We're just going to massage that. You can wet your hands if it's sticky. Just massage that all in so it sticks together. And as you can see, I'm not positioning the leg yet, right? I have lots of working time. So it's important not to panic that way. Let's get it all stuck together. And now I'm going to start my positioning. Paw in a natural standing position, and then I get to the natural standing position I want. If you're not trying to do varus and valgus, a lot of times you can just position it with the wand. Do you see all the bony landmarks I can see in this cast? You would never see that in a fracture cast, right? But I need to see those so we don't have hot spots in the plastic rubbing against it. So when I was doing my residency, the very first time I was given the freedom to do the casting without my residency director in the room. I was all proud of myself. I wrapped this gentleman's leg. It was for an AFO, which is an ankle foot orthosis, and wrapped it up to his knee, and was all proud. And I was waiting for it to set up like this, and so I reached over to pull out my hook blade, and I looked, and the cutting strip wasn't there. And my face turned red, and I started sweating, and I said, you know, I have to go grab Mike. I'll be right back. And I was like, I left the cutting strip, and he laughed, and we ended up getting out of it. Basically, you can take this and you can fold it up, and you can slide it underneath the edge and just slowly cut down to get out of it. But I was scared to death. And I don't forget the cutting strip anymore because of that. So please just learn from me on it. There's always tricks to get out of it, and so if you get into any situation, please give me a call. I've probably made the mistake. So there's a ways out of all of it. So now this is set up, you can kind of feel how hard it is. It's not like rock solid, but I'll be able to cut it. And so I'm just going to cut here on the top. Now, here's a spot where you can get in trouble. So if you're trying to push like this, or you have this awkward position or whatever, you need to turn your body so you can push down in and pull at the same time, okay? Now sometimes you get down here, and remember we wrapped down and up and say, well, I got too many layers here, and then you're trying to pull and it's around this corner and you're starting to sweat. You can actually take this and you can work it like a can opener, okay? And you just make 1/4 inch cuts, and you can cut all the way through there. And you can cut through probably 6 layers. So there's plenty to be able to cut through there. And doing that, sometimes you might twist it, you might bust that tip off. All you have to do is take a screwdriver, take this off, and then this blade flips over, and you have a backup on that blade, okay? So if you get in here like this, so you can just make a cut like that. This is pretty thin. Pull that through, and then cut your stockinette at the top. Pull this out. And you have your position. Now, some companies will ask you to do cross hatches so they can put this together better. As you can see, this layer matches up with this layer, and this layer matches up with this layer, and so on and so forth. Don't worry about it. I don't worry about marking out bony landmarks, because if you have something that's going to shift around even a little bit, it's not matching up, just wrap it tight. Look at all the bony landmarks I can see. You don't need to worry about marking them. Hi. Questions?
Does your cast putty warm up? Like when you're placing it, does it warm up?
Yeah, the reaction
like
the reaction will be warm. Yeah.
And do you recommend trimming the nails prior? Is that gonna change anything?
No. Furry dogs, I don't say trim. If you wrap it tight, we're gonna get the shape that we need. The only thing would be is if the fur is matted, you want to comb that out, because those matted blobs, you know. The stifle, you want to wrap it as high as you can into the groin, so we can see the whole thigh tissue. That kind of gets problematic a little bit with the furrier dogs, and so what you can do is you can lay some sort of padding here in between, and that kind of harnesses that fur. And then you really have to make sure that the person that's holding it up here, you don't just pull it on the side, because it won't pull the cotton stockinette up into the groin. You actually pull on the front and the back, and you pull up into the groin. And so the holder is very important on the stifle braces to get that up high.
Do you need photos, like, you know, some companies want like photos of them standing from different angles, and some also want video?
Yeah, all that helps. Generally, for the casting part, we ask for a casted video. our casted photo from behind for the stifle, from the side for the others. From behind, because